Welcome to another episode of Paranormal the New Normal. I am your host, as always, Jeremy, here trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Does it ever happen? No. But that's okay, because as always, I brought guests to try to help me accomplish this goal. And my guests today are Jen and Joe from the 222 Paranormal Podcast. I don't know if I say 222 or 222. But,
222. That's good.
But first things first, how you both doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Doing wonderful.
Doing great.
I'm glad to hear
Great
it.
to be on the show. I've seen a bunch of your shows, and they're really good. So, hey, I'm happy to be here.
Well, glad I can get you on. Whenever I get a message from a paranormal investigating team, I'm always like, of course I want you on my show. Why wouldn't I? I love paranormal investigators. But
Absolutely.
so let me start this off, and you guys can answer in any order you want for this one,
Yep.
or for any of my questions, really. But what got you into the paranormal?
Well, I'll start. I have always had a fascination for the paranormal ever since I was little. Like my dad back in the 70s would take me to the library and we get books on the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot. And I'd always be fascinated by ghosts and the show. Remember the show In Search of with Leonard Nimoy? Kind of sparked my journey. I always had a fascination for treasure hunting and mysteries. So as I got older, back in around 2008, 2009, I started ghost hunting. So going to some of the famously haunted locations such as Mansfield and, just different places around United States. Joe was at that time really getting into podcasting, and it was where podcasting was kind of emerging and coming out. And so Joe's like, "You're really into ghost stuff?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I'm into podcasting. Why don't we do about podcasting about the paranormal?" I'm like, "Okay." So we just one day we just decided to do it and jumped right in. And 7 years later, going on our 8th season, we are still putting out a weekly show and still learning every single day something new about the paranormal.
Oh, that's why I love this topic. You never stop learning. There's always
Never.
something new. I mean, even if it's just a theory that someone else has, like you're still learning because it's another idea put in your head, which I have a lot of those in my head right now for paranormal. So it's just constantly swirling up there like, what if? But
Right. And
So-
Joe,
Yeah, and I was always into, like Jen said, the UFOs and space and that. And I actually had a shared death experience with my best friend Jackie that really propelled me into the paranormal and the ghosty. I shouldn't say the paranormal because it's all intertwined, but it really propelled me into finding out more about the afterlife and what actually happens after we die, because it was a pretty profound thing that happened to me. And I'm writing a book about it right now, and hopefully we'll do like a documentary about it also in the future. But yeah, I was had a best friend that passed away, and we actually had a shared death experience. So it's a long story, but it's really made me think of what happens after we die, and is there an afterlife? Do we still exist in some way and still be able to communicate with the living? And it really opened us up. And like Jen said, here we are going next month, I believe it is, or July, it'd be
July.
our season number 8
Yeah.
with over 350 some shows and only one repeat, and not one missed week either. So that's that's pretty good.
that's pretty impressive because I mean, life happens. Like
Right.
to put it plainly, life happens, and I
Yeah.
mean, I record so many times a week just to make sure I always have stuff set to go in case something does happen to me. But it's and hi Valerie, sorry I didn't get your comment earlier, but hello, thank you for watching. But yeah, I mean,
even when Joe had a stroke, we still did the show.
Yep, got the scars to prove it.
Yep.
But yeah, it's the show must go on no matter what.
That's true.
exactly.
But luckily we
exactly.
had some in the can.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
But yeah, we've covered everything. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, go ahead. I want to hear this part.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say we've covered everything from ghosts to Bigfoot to aliens to near-death experiences, after-death experiences. Our show that just came out 2 days ago was about soul transfer and what they call walk-ins, when a soul leaves the body and a new soul comes in and basically takes that body over. So it's pretty interesting. You have to link it in your show notes there so everybody can check it out.
Yeah, I'll have to, because the only thing I could think of that compares to that in my head is Chucky.
Yeah.
Like the movie Chucky. Like that's the only thing I could think of. Like, I mean, I guess that kind of would.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, reincarnation in a way, I guess, would be soul transfer almost. But I think you're talking about more of like a
Pretty much,
takeover
yeah,
of the
but
body
this
than
is-
like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
like
mean,
you're
does
talking
it
about
happen?
takeover.
How often does it happen? Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Or
Well, I mean,
Yeah, we were talking. We lost Joe. Well, anyways, one of the things that we were talking about is like, you ever felt like you woke up and you have a fresh start, like, or you just get to the point where it's like you got to make a change now, and like everything completely changes, or people that have had transplants, all of a sudden that they're feeling the likes, or the have a certain penance for maybe the foods that the person who they got the transplant from, all of a sudden they take on some of their mannerisms. So there's a lot of different aspects of the soul transfer. So we thought it was a really fascinating topic, and so we lamented on that this week.
yeah, it is an interesting topic. And hey, Isaac, glad to see you
Hi,
watching.
Isaac.
But I mean, yes, I mean, so I don't know, soul transfer. I mean, it almost makes me think of like demons. It makes me think of like a demon
Mhm.
taking over a body type of thing, or
Sure.
maybe even an angel. Maybe even an angel, because angels supposedly
Okay.
can do that too. I mean, but
Well, part of it is a lot of times that happens when you're in a very tumultuous emotional state, right? When your barriers are down, or you may be suffering from like depression or anxiety. It's very easy for those type of entities to come in and maybe do an oppression, or a possession, or I had that experience after I ghost hunted at a haunted prison. I was not myself. Like it took about 2 weeks after I was there, and just started feeling really weird and feel like myself. Felt like there was something inside me just pulling myself down. I couldn't even explain it. And so Joe and I went to a conference. We were doing a paranormal conference, and this Native American shaman walked up to me, and he's like, "You have an attachment." And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "I got to break that for you." So he did some cleansing and prayers, and it was like instantly it was gone. I felt like myself again. It was the most bizarre thing. I can't explain it.
interesting. I mean,
Mhm.
I mean, I've been down the dumps, as they say, but I don't think I've ever had something attached to me per se. I mean, but I don't know. The paranormal world doesn't like to interact with me, from what I've seen.
Mm.
I mean, I live in a haunted house, and the damn spirit has not yet once appeared to me, and
Really?
he only said thank you to me once when I first moved in, and I was talking to investigators about what I did in the house. But
Oh,
other than
that's
that,
cool.
like nothing, no interactions whatsoever.
Mhm.
I see their orbs in my cameras all the time, but it's just like, I do a podcast. You have to know I do a podcast because I've been told you're in the room when I do it sometimes by mediums. But
Have you ever had anything paranormal happen while you're taping your podcast? Like through the
other
electronics?
no, I know
Mhm.
other paranormal podcasters who've had like stuff like that happen to them with spirits in their
Yeah.
house. But no, I don't know. He doesn't either. He doesn't care, or he just. I think he stay. I don't know. I think he stays in the garage. I think it's where he stays
Oh,
like
okay.
24/7, because
Do
we
you think
rarely catch stuff in the kitchen anymore or any other part of the house.
Do you think he was attached to the house or the land, or did he come in from maybe one of your investigations somewhere else?
I don't do investigations personally because I just
Oh, okay.
between working full time, having
Mhm.
2 young kids, and 2 big mastiffs, I have very little time to do anything with
Right.
podcasting. So my free time is podcasting and or video games once in a while.
Okay.
But
All right.
so I mean, investigating is not my
Forte.
realm per se. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm down to do it, but I just part of me also is like, this is how you get stuff to come home with you. I don't want to go
Right.
do that.
Right. Yeah. So we were at West Virginia Penitentiary, and Joe and I, it's a very, very, very strange and eerie place. There's a Native American mound directly across, hence the name Moundsville. The famous sugar shack in the basement, which was basically just a dirt floor basement that they would lock prisoners in with absolutely no guards. It was a free for all. So there was a lot of dark negative energy. And I think that's where I picked up my attachment from, because after Joe and I left, we didn't do any cleansing or tell the spirits to stay there because we were so tired from the investigation, because it went all night long, that we just wanted to get back to the hotel and sleep, because it was a very long night. But interesting, enough, it's very easy for people to get attachments, and it may not be something very heavy or quote unquote demonic. It could just be a negative entity that is, sometimes we call them energy vampires, where they're basically, and people can be like this too. I hear your dogs barking.
Oh yeah, that and as soon as anybody says energy vampire, I think of Colin Robinson from What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah, right. But
Uh,
it's just very easy for somebody who's susceptible to pick up these attachments, and you have to be very clear to the entities to tell them to stay where they are. They can't come home with you. They can't attach to you. I've had multiple encounters here in my house. So I bought this house 17 years ago. It's over 100 years old. I'm in my basement right now, and this is my sale closet over here. I sell, thrift, and sell online. But
okay.
upstairs, I've had full body apparitions. I've had dark shadow figures like go right in between Joe and I. We were standing there talking one day, and this shadow just moved right between us, and it was solid. And when I got goosebumps right now. Something's you might see something happen behind me, so just let me know if you guys see anything behind me happening. But I've heard whistles in the house. I've heard other people have whistles. I feel energy all the time. Sometimes I think at first when my dad passed away, I could feel his and sense him here. I haven't sensed him here in a long time. But I had a team come in that I work closely with, and they investigated the house, and they found multiple spirits here. The place that I'm at is called the 5 Points area. And back, 200 years ago, this area was called the Great Black Swamp. So Toledo, off of Lake Erie, I'm in Toledo, Ohio, by the way, was a giant swamp. It was like 20,000 acres worth of swamp, and it was Native American land, and they would not go into the swamp because of the negative spirits. The area that I'm in was a path or a route where they traveled. There's a meeting point probably 2 miles from my house, where the Hopewell and the Adena would meet, and they would have I don't know the exact word for it, but they would come together. They would do trading. There was a natural spring there, and the well's still there. And so this main area where I'm at is like a corridor for spirits. There's, we have limestone. I'm around a lot of water. There's a lot of railroad tracks. There's a lot of things that conduct energy through here. So I have this team come in, and there's spirits that kind of come through this lane, I guess you would say, and they kind of stop off at like different areas or houses around here. So I had this really interesting spirit in my house, and I don't think he's here now, but he was making his presence known. He was a young man that in the 80s, himself and his pregnant girlfriend were murdered at a Burger King not far from my house. Well, I don't know how, if he was just coming down the corridor or how, maybe he sensed a beacon of like, there's somebody who can hear me or see me. He ended up at my house. And, when my friend was telling me this is what I'm picking up on, we were doing an investigation in my bedroom upstairs, and all of a sudden I got really, really lightheaded. I fell back against the wall and I slid down the floor. It took all my energy out. And this young man who was killed, was coming through and saying, like, I just kind of want to be remembered and recognized. And so after we did the investigation, I went and started doing some digging because I wanted to find out if this was, truly something that did happen. And back in the 80s, his name was Angel. He was murdered with his pregnant girlfriend at the Burger King, like a mile from my house. So it was just really interesting area. I've had other psychic mediums tell me that there's 2 females, a male spirit here, a couple dogs and cats, which I never see, but they don't want to be recognized. They just want to be here, which is fine. I don't care, as long as you're not like scaring me in the middle of the night, which I've had things wake me up in the middle of the night several times. I don't mind that they're here as long as they're not scary to me.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I just want to say real fast, hello, Isla. Hello, Charles. Glad to have you guys watching. Some of my normal watchers every once in a while. But
awesome.
Where you live kind of reminds me of where my wife is originally from, down by the Bridgewater Triangle. Like,
okay.
a lot of similarities there. Like, same thing with the swamp and Native Americans not wanting to go in to the Huckamuck Swamp because it's an evil place. And but yeah, they made it more evil because they cursed the land when the white men were killing them out. But
and it's really interesting because from the podcast we found out so much information just about the area that we're in. Now, that part of the swamp, back in the early 1900s, they were building a bridge over the Maumee River. So the Maumee River is like the main tributary that comes from Lake Erie or goes out into Lake Erie. So it's like comes from the St. Joe River. It's tied to the Mississippi, all the rivers kind of tie together. When they were building this bridge called the High Level Bridge that goes over this river that cuts through our town, they found giant skeletons in mounds that were along the river banks, which is really interesting because there's so much local legend that the Native Americans wouldn't go in the swamp. They're afraid of the spirits that were in there. So when they were building this in the early 1900s, they found these giant giant skeletons. The skulls had double rows of jaws, teeth. They found them over by the Toledo Yacht Club also, which is probably, about 5 miles down the road on the bank of the Lake Erie. So it's interesting that they were afraid of what was in the swamp. And then, there was mounds built with these burials in it. They excavated it, found these bones. Supposedly, the Smithsonian came in and took them. It could have been the government. Who knows?
It was the government.
I'm sure. Like
they love to take giant skeletons, like they used to love to.
And it's so interesting because Ohio, if you go and you research giant skeletons in Ohio, you will find all of these old newspaper articles back from the early or late 1800s into the early 1900s in Tiffin, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, Bowling Green, Ohio, all of these towns in and around our area and the Great Lakes. And if you research further, the amount of burial mounds in the state of Ohio, there's over 2,000 documented mounds, possibly more, but some of them just get destroyed, right? Like, people move in and they clear the land. And we have a very famous one called the Serpent Mound, which is kind of in the middle of Ohio. And it is, if you ever look it up, it's a huge park, and these mounds are giant. I mean, like, you can walk into the main circle area. They don't let you go on top of the mounds, but they've excavated them, and they found that the Native Americans had used them to bury on top of what was already there. So when they're excavating these different layers, they're finding things that are going back, tens of thousands of years, and finding giant weaponry and giant jewelry. I mean, things that would a normal person, like, I think most of us in America aren't, over 6 foot. But these things were made for 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 foot people. And it's just fascinating. It's like how you go down that rabbit hole. You start with, there's a ghost in my house, and you end up in looking into a Native American burial ground that's, 100 miles from my house. And I don't know. It's so fascinating, having the podcast and being able to find out all of these different and strange and unusual stories. It's like preserving the history of all of these different locations and ghost stories and legends. And, I could go on for hours, but I won't.
I mean, it's fascinating. It truly is fascinating. And I mean,
yeah,
it's funny. I'm from Massachusetts, and yet I don't hear that many like stories around me of like this type of stuff at all. Like, you'd think I would, because old history, but then again, Midwest was more like not settled for a long time compared to out here, so maybe there was more chance for things. And I don't know, it's weird. All out in the Midwest, there's all these giant skeletons that have been found over the last couple hundred years, and it makes you think. Because I mean, Nephilim were supposedly killed off in a flood, according to historical records and biblical records. But what if they weren't all killed? What if they knew how to get into the cave systems in America, at least, to protect themselves?
Yeah, I mean, our area here, we have salt mines that run from Detroit all the way to Cleveland. And you can literally drive in these salt mines underneath the Great Lakes from one city to another. So, you have something that's highly conductive. You have a cave system. We found, in Ohio, what they call the, let me think. And Joe has a replica of them, but they're, the Newark Holy Stones. So basically they found these stones that were buried with ancient Israeli writing on them from like 10,000 years ago. So, it's very possible that, people were exploring, or there could have been, offshoots or branches of different races. I mean, look at Bigfoot, it's very possible. I mean, we're in a very super forested area here. Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. You don't realize how much forest is there and how much is unexplored. It's very possible that there could have been little clusters of, different races of giants, or, Sasquatches or Bigfoots, that have been undetected for so long. Now, do I think there's still the Nephilim alive? I don't think so. I think we would have discovered it. There may be one or two little clans. I mean, there is reports of them being in caves in Iran or one of those Middle Eastern countries that they had soldiers battled them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, supposedly Iraqian or Iran soldiers killed a giant not long ago. So I mean,
Yeah.
which my question is now is where the hell's the body? But I'm sure the government
never see
swooped
it.
in. The men in black swooped in and took that one, whatever, as they're called nowadays, khaki men. But they swept right in and took that one out. But I mean, it's just, and I'm pretty sure I heard a story about a giant being photographed on top of a mountain in Canada.
Yeah.
So I mean, do giants still exist? I mean, if they do, they're very endangered. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
If they still exist, they're not. I mean, you're not going to roam into the woods and come across a village of giants. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like out of a fairy tale or something. Like, it's not going to. But is there a few lone ones here and there that live in the woods? Maybe.
And we don't know what their lifespan is. You know, they could have a 200-year lifespan, or, you know, their reproductive gestation could be, you know, 2 years. So maybe they have a 200-year or 300-year lifespan. We don't know. It's kind of like the whole Bigfoot theory is like, there could be small clusters. There could be, you know, protected, but I look at so much information about the Native Americans who, you know, have had sightings or had dealings with what they call the wild man or the wild beast on their reservations. They leave them be. They leave them at peace. They try, you know, if they have to interact, it's very rare, but I mean, it's very possible to have these little subsets or little clans here and there. You know, they travel, you know, they follow the food source or the water source. So it's possible that they are constantly moving, just like any, you know, pack of, say, wild gorillas or great apes. I mean, it's just 150 years ago they found a new species.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
you know, it's very possible.
I mean, I am a huge believer that Bigfoot is Gigantopithecus, and that it was just left over from the caveman era, and it's just been around. I mean, humans were killing it, and that's what people thought happened to it, is that humans killed it out. So I've always been a big believer that that's just what they are. They grew hair because they're living in the wild, and they evolved to grow hair. And I mean, or they always did. Who knows? I mean, we've only seen drawings. We haven't seen, not like we're gonna get pictures from that far back, or a body even. But besides skeletons, but I mean, it's just, I think it's what it is. Could they be extraterrestrial in origin? Maybe. I have a theory. That ties into as well. But I mean, I don't like when people say like, oh, they're ultra terrestrial, which you know, they come from other dimensions. I can't buy into that. I just can't. I mean, people have killed them in the past, unfortunately. People have seen them move, and I mean, and it's not like they leave. Like, if you see one in your backyard, 10 to 1, you're going to see it again at some point. It may not be right away, but you'll see it come around again at some point. It's not just hopping in and out the dimensions like, oh, forgot these foods over here, I'm gonna go take those. But no, I mean, it's just, I mean,
it's, you know, there's did you ever hear the famous case of the when Mount St. Helen erupted? I don't know if you're old enough to remember that. I am, because I'm 52. But
I think I know what you're gonna say. I think I know what you're gonna say. I think I have heard it, but for our listeners, we can always go back to it one more time.
Yeah. So, you know, a famous story or legend was that there was a clan of Sasquatches living on Mount St. Helen, and when it erupted, the army went in and removed all of the carcasses or bodies. And one of the young men who was in the army at the time was told never to talk about it. You will, you know, forget what you see. But he did tell a story eventually, you know, like 40 years later, that there was, you know, this clan living up there. They knew they were up there, and when the explosion happened, that they had to go up and retrieve the bodies, and they took them away to someplace unknown, you know, probably for research or whatever it is.
Dissection, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, people don't understand how much vastness there is in the United States that hasn't even been tracked through or discovered. Like Joe and I, this is really interesting. Joe and I went to this place in Pennsylvania called the Black Cross. So it's this way out of the way area. We were coming from a ghost hunt or paranormal convention. I can't even remember because we travel through there all the time. And we stopped at this place called the Black Cross. Now, this is a, one of those like historical markers that you see on the side of the road, or maybe back, in different places. It was very out of the way, but we wanted to go see it. So what it was a area of the forest, and it was very expansive, that during the cholera epidemic back in, I want to say like the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s, there was a bunch of immigrants that had come over to build the railroad going through Pennsylvania. They caught yellow fever or cholera or a mix of both and died. Well, because they weren't baptized or different religions, they weren't able to be buried in a regular cemetery. So this farmer donated a part of his land so they could bury them in a mass grave. So there's a historical marker there. And so we stopped there because there's rumors of paranormal activity. We get there and you kind of have to walk in maybe 10, 15 yards off of the road to get to the actual spot. Somebody had put up a like a memorial. They created just like a little cement thing. Originally, because it was the railroad workers, they took 2 railroad ties and made a cross there. That's why they call it the Black Cross. So we go in there, and after you get through the area where the actual cross used to be, it's not there anymore. It fell down or was stolen, who knows. You go a little bit back into the forest, and beyond that, it starts going downhill. So it's like just this forested area that just goes on for miles. There's nothing around. We get in there, strange feelings. We felt like we were being watched. Now we know there was no houses around. There was nobody coming down. It's like a 1-lane highway. We can, attest that there's nobody around. I start walking back behind, going towards the forest. And it was really, really spooky. And I'm getting the chills right now. The entire forest went silent. There was not a bird chirping. There was not a leaf rustling. There was not a squirrel, nothing. It went completely silent. Now that's kind of along the lines of like when people have Bigfoot encounters, they experience that white just noise. So I got a little freaked out. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to head back to where the guys, Joe and my brother Joe and another friend of ours were back where the memorial was. And we're standing there, and off to the side, there's this like the giant tree stump, because it's like old, the forest area. And somebody had hung a red ribbon on that tree stump. Well, I look at Joe, and he turns, and he literally jumped off the ground this far. And I've never seen my brother Joe. He's a very mild-mannered person. Nothing really gets to him. Nothing shocks him. He literally jumped off the ground. A soldier came out of nowhere, out of the stump, and lunged at him. And he said it had a red coat on, gray pants, kind of like a hat. And I reacted because I saw him jumping. And it was just the weirdest experience. Like, the whole forest is going quiet. Joe has a paranormal experience. We hightail it out of there afterwards. It shook him for like an hour. And my I've never known him to be shook by anything, right? Like he's like, I'm the anti-ghost magnet. Nothing ever happens to me. And then he has this experience. And he said his heart was racing. His adrenaline was going for over an hour. And so we left there. And, just couldn't explain. Of course, nobody had a camera running, right? Because we were just exploring.
Of course.
Right. I think we did capture an EVP there. I'll have to ask Joe if he can get back on. Unfortunately, he's on the island. He's down in the Caribbean, and he's not luck with his Wi-Fi down there. So,
Okay.
so
And yes, just some comments to take care of before we move on.
okay.
Josh, I'm glad you agree with me that Bigfoot is not interdimensional.
Mhm.
And yeah, the Mount St. Helens thing, I actually wanted to talk about that for a second because the story I always heard was that when it happened, a Bigfoot came running out of the woods alive but on fire, and they put him
Whoa.
out. They put it out, and I heard that they put him in an ambulance, and they started driving away with them, and then the two ambulance drivers never heard from again.
Wow. That is
That's why I heard.
possible. I'd love to dig a little deeper into that and find
I
out.
mean, it could have been two. It could have been two separate incidents, possibly.
Mhm.
It might just. It might.
Yeah.
Mine might have just been a random forest fire. It might not have been a volcano erupting, but who
Mhm.
knows? I mean, it's
Yeah.
just. I mean, but there's so many stories of Bigfoots getting saved by humans. I mean, it's just. I don't know. Anybody who says they don't believe in Bigfoot, I just like look at them like, are you all there? Like, are you all there? Because how can you not in this day and age? How can you not?
Well, this is interesting because Joe and I, this is funny. We were having a garage sale one time at his house because we were trying to raise money to go to a paranormal convention. So we're having a garage sale and we had some of our ghost hunting equipment out, and Joe was like wearing his, 222 t-shirt. And this guy comes to the garage sale and he's probably in his mid 60s. And he's looking at us real weird. Now, we're used to weird people coming to our garage sales, right? Like, I don't care, right? I'll talk to anybody. This guy's looking at us like sideways. So I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, do you believe in that stuff? And we're like, well, yeah, we have a show and we talk about this and we talk about Bigfoot and we talk about ghosts. And he's like, and we hear this a lot, this phrase. I've never told anybody this, but, I was like, oh, here it comes. He said that back in the 70s, when he was a teenager, he was in Lambertville, Michigan, which is just over the Ohio border from us. That's probably 3-4 miles from where from Joe's house on the Michigan-Ohio border. And he said at the time it was very forested. There wasn't like the developments like there is now, but they were in the woods and they encountered a Bigfoot. And he said that it was him and his buddy, and they stopped and they were so frightened. The one kid went catatonic. He couldn't move. So the guy who was telling us the story took off running, was running, thought his buddy was behind him, and he wasn't. So he got scared. So he went back. And when he went back, the kid was frozen in place. He could not move. He was absolutely terrified. So he shook him, and finally the kid came to. And they ran out of there. And he said that kid never, ever talked to him again. And he never heard from him again. And he just didn't know what happened. And he's like, I have never told anybody this story. And I was like, it's not surprising, that there's been a lot of reports of them in Ohio, Michigan, upper Michigan.
Everywhere.
Is a big hot spot. Yeah.
The only state in the country they have not been reported in is Hawaii, for obvious reasons. But
yeah,
well, which I mean, even that, I mean, I don't know. Which kind of makes you think, how far back have they been in America? Because I believe Hawaii was once connected to America, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I think, or it might have been connected to Japan. I don't really know how that worked, but
I think all the lands were connected at one point.
Well, yeah, I mean Pangea. I mean, but so they had to evolve. I don't know, because they are all in other countries as well, all over the world, like just different names. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I can sit here pondering it for hours. And thank you, Josh. I appreciate you sharing out the feed. Send me an invite. I'll join your group. But good transitioning point, because you just said it. You're right next to Michigan, and you're actually pretty close to Wisconsin too. So, what do you think about dogmen?
I kind of go back and forth with dogmen. I think anything is possible, but I'm kind of on the fence about the dogmen. I really think that the sightings that we see could have been maybe wolves, because they have been reintroduced into Michigan. They haven't been there for a long, long time. But then I have a friend who had a terrifying dogman experience when her and her husband lived in Kentucky. They were he was in the Army, and they were living in a trailer, and they were on their show. So if anybody wants to listen to the story, just look up Black Swamp Paranormal 222. And they had this terrifying experience where there were multiple people in this trailer, and the thing was tearing the trailer up. They knew it wasn't a bear. It had the canine snout to it. It wasn't a Bigfoot. It didn't have like the flat face features. It definitely had the canine. But it's who's to say if one paranormal type cryptid is possible and another isn't? Because if you're a believer, you're going to believe in the possibility of anything.
Exactly.
Whether it's an elemental or a cryptid or a spirit or a poltergeist. Yeah.
Oh, and Josh answered my question for me, by the way. He says Florida was part of Africa, and he believes Hawaii was part of Japan.
Okay.
So
Yep.
that makes sense to some. Yeah. Florida was connected to Africa at one point, because and then when it split apart, it stuck to the United States. But
yeah.
But I mean, yeah. See, the thing with dogmen is, and it's one of my top 2 cryptids, so I had to bring it up always. But I've heard so many stories from. I had DA Roberts of the North America Dogman Patrol on my on here a couple months ago, maybe 6 months ago now. But actually, no, it hasn't been that long. But and like the stories he tells about being in Wisconsin up at the Land Between the Lakes, and like looking for dogmen, like the stories he tells are just like spine chilling just to even hear them. Like I could imagine going up there looking for that, because that one's got so many stories of murdering people up there. It's not even funny. Like it's just
it's a predatory animal versus where a Bigfoot isn't very interested in killing and eating humans, where a canine, that would be part of their diet, basically anything, red-blooded meat.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
nibble on me.
and if you go to the northern part of Land Between the Lakes, there's no roadkill. You see no roadkill on the side of the road. You see the forest is absolutely silent all day, every day. Like it's something's living there, and it's not, and like animals are smart enough to stay away from that part of the island. So
yeah, well, it's interesting too, because they have such a keen sense. I'm sure their senses are way more advanced than ours. Their sense of hearing, their sense of smell. They're probably using some kind of infrasound, like a tiger would, or a moose. They could be right next to you. You would never know it.
Exactly. Oh, I mean, and they move with, from what I've heard. I mean, I've heard there's 2 different types of dogmen, and there's 2 different types of Bigfoot, like different species almost. And one Bigfoot species is a little aggressive towards humans, while the other one is docile, the one we all know about.
Yeah.
As far as the dogmen go, there's one that was more curious about humans and doesn't really straight attack them, and may try to bluff you and may try to mess with you, but it's not going to straight out just attack you. But the other one, the other one's the one you don't want to run into in the middle of the woods at any time of the day. But
they're going to be territorial. They're going to be predatory, right? They're always looking for food stores. It was interesting. The very first paranormal convention I went to was a dogman convention in Defiance, Ohio. And it was fascinating, because I was like, there was a sighting in Defiance, which is probably about an hour drive from where I live here in Toledo. And, it was very, I expected it to be, I guess a little campy or hokey, but it wasn't. It was very scientific base. One of the speakers was Ken Gerhardt, who actually came and was at the convention I put on here in Toledo, the Toledo Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. And he touched a little bit on it in his speech, but, just really fascinating how, the reports, the sightings, trying to mix it in with maybe, some kind of like hybrid of like a dire wolf.
Possible. I mean, but
You
they're
know,
intelligent from what I've been told. They're intelligent. Hello, Hannah and Nikki. Thank you for watching.
Hey
But
guys.
I mean, I don't know. To me, dogmen kind of have to exist because I always go back to the cave systems. The cave systems on the East Coast, the West Coast, and even in the Midwest, there's some as well. Like, why wouldn't there be creatures in these caves that live there? Because no human has walked through these caves completely, except for Native Americans hundreds and hundreds of years ago on spiritual journeys. So, and they weren't exactly going to tell the white men, "Oh, don't go in there." They're probably hoping we go in there. But I mean,
Send us in
I
there.
mean, I don't know. I mean, I could see Bigfoot clans living in there. I could see dogmen families living in there, or dogmen packs, I guess, be the right terminology. But
Sure.
I don't know. It's just, it's hard because I had. All right, well, put it this way: I had a guest on my show, like the third guest or fourth guest I had. He was in the army, and one of his troop mates was from New Orleans, and they were over in Egypt serving, and he saw a statue of Anubis, and his troop mates started freaking the hell out, like what the hell is that? Like what is that? And they're like, that's a statue of an ancient Egyptian god, and he's like, no, he's like, I've seen that thing twice in my backyard when I was a kid growing up. Which
the Rougarou.
The Rougarou, yep. New Orleans is Rougarou country, so I mean, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. Either there's wild dogs that evolved over time and got smarter and could run on two legs for a long period of time, or I don't know. I mean, the possibilities are just endless, and that's what I love about dogmen and the amount of sightings and everything I've heard of. Just, I mean, the Beast of Bray Road to begin with, like that's what got me into dogmen is the Beast of Bray Road. But see, I gotta start going to these conventions. That's the biggest thing is I don't go to conventions at all.
It's amazing because everybody is, really, really open-minded. It's not judgmental. I learned so much every time I go to, and I've been to hundreds of conventions. I've vended it from one coast to the other. I always learn something new every time I go to a convention. We're always interviewing somebody. Everybody has a theory. Everybody has maybe a little piece of evidence that they want to share. And it's fascinating because, you can look online, but really hearing somebody's firsthand experience, it's just amazing. Like,
well, that's what got me into, that's what got me back into the paranormal like 5-6 years ago, because I got out of it for a long time. I grew up loving it as a kid, and I got out of it for years because life got in the way, trying to find your soulmate and all that got in the way, but and trying to survive in the world. But a podcast I came across, Monsters Among Us by Derek Hayes.
Yep.
That got me back into the paranormal, hearing people's voices when they tell their own tales of encounters and hearing the terror in their voices as they're talking about something that happened years or months ago. It's just, oh my God, like how can you not believe hearing these people talk? Like how can anyone not believe hearing these people talk? I mean, yeah, some of them sound a little made up, but he does a good job of like weeding out the ones that are obviously fake. So
sure, yeah. But to that person, that experience was real to them, right? So you can't discount. Oh, they might be, if that person had that experience, I try not to be judgmental, and I try not to be like, I guess crazy's wearing tinfoil on his head. But to that person who had that experience, I don't need a piece of evidence. I don't have to have a carcass, or I don't have to have a video. If that person is telling me they had that experience and they're, passionate about it, or, emotional about it, I believe they had that. And, it's amazing. Ooh, okay, somebody witnessed a cryptid kangaroo.
Oh, they're near the mangroves. Is that Florida, Josh? I think it is, but
wow, that's cool.
And I've heard. Yeah, I'm not gonna read all that comment, Josh. Sorry, it's a long one. If people want to read it, they can watch the video. But I've heard of kangaroo cryptids. It's a thing, kind of. I mean, it's not. It's like the level of frogman, lizard man type thing. It's not like up to the Bigfoot dogman level, but it's definitely a thing that exists. And I think Australia is a big thing for that. But I mean, but then again, you probably are just. And yes, Rob, we are talking about dogmen, and not how you spell werewolves, buddy. But yeah, Rob Wiles, the head of the network.
Who's to say? We did a show about these legends of black dogs that appear, and I actually had an experience here in a haunted location here in Toledo. There's a place called the Collingwood Arts Center, and it was built in the 1800s. It was originally it was a mansion, and then the gentleman back in the early 1800s, he lost his fortune, sold the mansion to these Ursuline nuns, where they built this huge convent, and it's like 5 stories tall, and it's got multiple wings and a giant there's 2 theaters, like art theaters inside of it. We've investigated there many, many, many times. So we're in the basement, and this is where all the activity is. And I have a video on YouTube of like something that happened to me in the basement. If anybody wants to go see it, it's on our 222 page on YouTube. And we were down there, and we were seeing these shadow figures, and they were moving around, kind of like humanoid, and then it morphed into like a dog shape. And it was the strangest thing I ever seen in my life. I can't even explain it. I thought I was like going cuckoo, but I mean, it's very possible that, who's to say that things aren't manifesting,
I mean, it's funny. You're not the first person on my show to talk about black dogs, or I think are they called shags or sheks? I forget what they're called.
Shucks.
That's what it is.
Yeah. SHUCK or something along that lines.
Shucks, yeah, shucks, yeah.
But
it seems like they're tied though to religion. They're always tied to places that had ties in religion. And I mean, like, I had an investigator from the UK on here, Waza. He has a picture of him at this church where supposedly in the 1800s a hellhound or shuck, actually the paw print is still on the wooden door to this day that it left.
Yeah. So why that legend came about is that when a church would create a new cemetery next to the church, they would always sacrifice a black dog and bury it on the property, because they wanted the first spirit or ghost of that cemetery to be the watchdog for the rest of the spirits. So it started in Germany. They would sacrifice a black dog, and so that's kind of how the legend came about, that people would see these black dogs in cemeteries guarding at night. I don't know if you've ever heard of this story. I got a good one for you here. So there's a place in Erie, Pennsylvania called the Erie Cemetery. In the Erie Cemetery, they have what they call the vampire crypt. So, of course, Joe and I have to go investigate this place, right? So it is one of the spookiest places you'll ever look. Go look it up. It's called the Erie Vampire Crypt. It's a crypt built in the side of a hill in the cemetery. Now, very spooky cemetery. It's got graves going back to the 1700s. There's a witch's circle where apparently some witches have been buried in a circle in the cemetery. One of the things is people see white dogs roaming the cemetery, and sometimes black dogs, and they've seen this dog on top of the earth that's on top of this crypt. Joe and I go there, and there's a rumor of a lady in a white dress who appears, and so we go there. We're standing in front of the crypt. We're kind of filming. We're talking. I look over, and there's a lady standing next to me in a white sweater, like a long white sweater, and I just see her out of the corner of my eye. I'm like, oh my God, the lady in white's here. I turn. It's an actual lady. She wanted to know what we were doing, but she scared me because I just see this white lady and a lady in white standing next to me. Kid you not.
Interesting.
We're standing there telling this lady what we do. Okay, sorry. I just heard something upstairs. I just heard a scream upstairs. Maybe you guys will catch it. My house is haunted by the way. So
I heard something.
I saw something. Okay. Well, anyway, sorry. So we're standing there talking to this lady, telling her what we do, and then like the legend of this. She didn't know anything about it. These freaking 2 coyotes come walking up to us. Now, coyotes, if you ever encounter them, they're very mean. They're very aggressive. They will they will come after you. These coyotes just walk up to us and we're like, what the heck? We were scared. We were like, are they going to attack us? What's happening? And they just came around and sniffed us and they walked away and then we didn't see them again. It was the weirdest thing. It was so unusual. Strange stuff.
So weird.
But they call it the vampire crypt.
I was asking
because there's been deaths associated with this particular crypt. Back in the early 10s or 20s, 1910 or 1920, some kids had broke in and stole the finger off a corpse that had a ring on it, as kids would do, right? So the kid goes home. His friends come over. They're like, we want to see this one. We want to see this. So the mom's calling up to him upstairs. No answer. The kid's dead. He died after he pulled his finger off the ghost or the corpse. There was another incident where somebody was thrown off the top of it. It's really, really interesting and spooky. So if anybody's into that kind of thing, vampires and local legends and dogmen, check it out.
Yeah, please. I'll be putting out a link for your podcast in the description of the show, of course. Yeah. And one last thing before we wrap up. Rob has a question. Doesn't talking about ghosts annoy them?
Doesn't talking about it, you know what? I always think of this way. What your personality in life is probably going to be your personality in the afterlife. So, if you're an angry or curmudgeon or grumpy person, you're probably going to be that way in the afterlife, and they probably don't want you to talk about them or annoy them. But like me, I'm all for it. Like, hey, I'm going to be coming visiting everybody after I pass away. I'll be knocking on your door and I'll be hiding your keys and I'll be popping out at you. So I guess it just depends on the person, or the spirit, or maybe the circumstances of your passing. It's interesting too, because now we have all this knowledge, right, of what we think goes on in the afterlife, and we've had paranormal shows. So like when we get to the other side, we all know that we're going to be like freaking our friends out and come back and saying hello to people, or go haunt some place that you used to hang out at.
Oh, I will be that I'll be that ghost just hanging out in the comic book store all the time, like, right? Ooh, I'm just gonna sit here and read all these for the rest of eternity. I'm happy with that. Yay. Right. But and we're gonna have to get you guys back on at some point when Joe's in a place.
We'd love to come on. I got a million stories I could go on all night.
I can listen to them all night, but we'll definitely have to do it when Joe gets a place with better internet connection.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I didn't want to bring up like UFOs or aliens without him here, because that's his thing. So
he could go on and on. I'm like, I'll talk about ghosts, Bigfoot, and vampires, and he could talk about aliens and UFOs and starseeds and indigo children, and it'll go on and on.
Some of my favorite topics right there, and I've had a couple of those on my show. But
cool.
I love starseeds. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But tell the people where they can find you guys, where they can find your podcast. Promote yourself to the fullest.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Our podcast is the 222 Paranormal Podcast. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you're into that kind of thing, you can find us on any of the podcast outlets. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Libsyn, iTunes, or whatever they call it now, Apple Podcasts. Anywhere you can get a podcast, you can look us up, or you can just Google us. A lot of times we'll post our show on our Facebook page. You can listen there. And we do a weekly show. It comes out every Sunday at 2:22 in the afternoon. It's always a new topic. We only repeated a topic once when I had COVID. So, over 350 shows on all different types of topics, whatever you're into. We did a great one called The Ghost Ships of the Great Lakes. It's one of my favorite stories. Talked a lot about it, the Edmund Fitzgerald. But, there's something for everybody. There's a different topic. So, thank you very much. If you guys check out our podcast, we'd love that. And we love to promote Jeremy's show as well. I know he's got about 90 episodes. I was listening today to as many as I could while I was working. So I really enjoyed your show.
Is there 90? I mean, actually, yeah. The last time I was on Apple and I saw a count, it was or on Good Pods and I saw a count, it was like 70 something. So that's possible.
I think you're up to 90 now.
Woohoo! I gotta make a big deal when it hits 100. But
you gotta catch up with us, right?
May take a few years, but we'll see.
Okay,
but
cool.
And we'll definitely have you guys back on because when you mentioned the Great Lakes, I thought of another topic we didn't get to, but I want to get to sometime. But
okay, yeah, for sure.
I'll tell you after we go off the air. But of course, all my listeners know you can find me on Facebook as Jeremy Bryant, as Paranormal New Normal / Maniacal Music Musings Podcasts with an S group. You can find me on Twitter and the Gram as @Juggalo Bastard. You can find me on TikTok as @Juggalo Bastard Podcast. And you can find me on YouTube just by searching Paranormal New Normal where this is streaming. And if you're on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like. And if you're listening on Spotify or any other podcatcher, subscribe and like. Please and thank you. But until next time, I appreciate everybody that came and watched us, and I appreciate all those that listened to this. And of course, I appreciate Jen and Joe for coming on.
Yeah, Joe, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Joe, if you hear this someday, hopefully we can get you both back on when you could be here, because I want to talk I want to talk UFOs with you, buddy. So we're going. But thank you, everybody, and
all right, guys.